official thing.
Okay.
All right, everyone, we're live. This is live in vivo. We got Jane Carter. She's getting water.
Because I'm so prepared.
Yeah. And yeah, welcome in, everyone. I always like to talk about the weather. It's the easiest. And Jane's in Asheville and I'm in Chicago, and we're having our first 50-degree weather in weeks. The snow is gonna melt today. I'm claiming it. It's all gonna be gone when I leave my office today. So let us know where you're joining in from this morning. And do you have snow? And do you want it to be? Do you still want it? I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it to be gone. Let us know where you're joining in this morning. It'd be great to hear you. So just put it in the chat in the comments. We are streaming this live, and we're going to talk about storytelling. And then at the end, we're going to leave it also for questions. But we might interrupt ourselves if you have a question in the comment. We can highlight and ask. So, and for those, this is going to be pre-recorded. You'll get an email of this recording. And some of you submitted in that really nice question box that we asked you, submitted some questions. And so we're going to be trying to answer some of those today. Hey, no snow in Maryland, thankfully. Yeah, but okay, what part of Maryland? Because I got some Maryland clients there, and they got a little bit of snow, or maybe recently, maybe it's just cold. Liz, San Diego, 60 degrees. Yeah, you know what, Liz? No. Okay. Oh, San Francisco Bay Area. Okay, thanks, Gene. Yeah, perfect weather all the time, San Diego. That's great. Frederick, there we go. We got some Maryland content. Look, it's all Maryland and California today. That's all we got.
That is two random states. That's great.
Great. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to jump in. So, all right, today's topic. All right, welcome to the Brand Your Practice podcast. And in today's topic, we're going to talk about telling better stories to get more clients. The three things we're going to be focusing on are why storytelling is key to effective marketing, how to fit more clients, more stories into your marketing, and where to find the stories you tell. Inspiration is everywhere. So how to find those stories to tell. And so we'll be geeking out around story and answering your questions. And I think this is going to be really important for you as practice owners, as business owners, because the way you can lodge yourself, your brand into somebody's brain is by telling a compelling story. And there's a formula for those things. And we'll probably get into some formulaic storytelling, but it's going to be really important for your brand moving forward. Okay. But before we go in, our presenting sponsor is TheraSAS, and many of you know TheraSAS. It's a powerful intake CRM. You know, if you are tired of Post-it notes, if you're tired of Excel spreadsheets and all the color codedness of those, and clients are still falling through the cracks, TheraSAS could actually be a helpful CRM for you. All you do is put a simple TheraSAS form on your website, and then that's going to be put into that contact will be put into the visual pipeline here. So you know where everyone is at in the journey in becoming a paying client, so that no one's falling through the cracks. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of automations that you can use to do those repetitive tasks all the time. You just automate those. You'll get real-time analytics for a dashboard, so you always know the health of your sales and marketing initiatives. So if that's you and you're listening and you're watching, go over to therasas.com and schedule a demo to see if it's a good fit for you. All right. The other thing I want you to know about, if you're a group practice owner, we have the Group Practice Scaling Summit in Chicago, the first weekend in May 1 and May 2. It's a Thursday and Friday. This is our second year to do it. Last year was a wonderful success. And the idea behind this is this. You went to graduate school to become amazing clinicians, but they did not teach you how to be business owners in graduate school. So this is all around being tactical as it relates to marketing, your operations, and your finances. Okay, so we're going to be talking about branding and marketing. We're going to be talking about competitive pay structures to retain clinicians. Actually, there's a lot around retaining clinicians this year. How to manage and creating a culture so that clinicians want to stay around and be working for you. And we also have Allison Pigeon coming, and she's going to be talking about how to build wealth by owning your building. Maybe you want to be a real estate owner as it comes to owning the practice that you are working in, or just owning property and how to build wealth that way. So again, business, it's all about business. No fluff, all tactical. It's great. Okay, so here we are. Jane Carter is a therapist turned business coach for solopreneurs who want to go out of who want to get out of their own way and to make more money and have more fun in the process. She loves helping therapists and other solopreneurs put their business on the couch so they can find joy and purpose as they serve their clients, have a business aligned with their values and personality, and find themselves saying, I can't believe I get paid so well to do work I love so much. She lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where she's an outdoors woman, craft beer snob, and a local foodie. And I met Jane at the Y Summit with Whitney Owens, and I sat in her, let's say, the breakout session on telling stories. And since I'm a former Story Brand certified guide coach thing, and I was compelled to sit in, and she had a lot of great things to say. And I was like, I'd love to have you on my podcast. So welcome, Jane. Good to have you.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I didn't know that you were a Story Brand guide. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was it for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
It was great.
So you
I learned a ton.
appreciate the whole storytelling angle. That's great.
I would say it was the number one thing, framework, whatever you want to call it, that scaled every single practice that I helped start around the country with clients.
That's
like
great.
The branding, all of it. Like that whole framework worked. It worked for all my businesses that I've started. Like, because you need a framework, just like
you need a framework.
Therapists need a framework on how people change, right?
Yeah.
And using different modalities to kind of help support that framework. It's the same thing with sales and marketing. Like you need a framework in order to organize all of that in your system.
Yeah.
So story's the best way to do it, I think. And it's the most fun.
It is the most fun. And we really are wired for it. I mean, I'm a fan of Story Brand, and I appreciate the ways that they've elevated the craft of story, or even just the concept of using stories in marketing and using that. Yeah, again, it's a framework overall, but we are so wired for stories. You know, there are those cave paintings from 40,000 years ago that they found where, I mean, early humans would sit around and tell stories. That's how we congeal information. That's how we connect to others. I think the statistic is we are 22 times more likely to recall information that we've learned through a story versus just hearing a list of information.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just, when people hear a story, they light up, their attention gets refocused.
Yeah. Also the parts of the brain that want to throw objections, object. The brain, storytelling actually allows the brain to relax enough, and you can then engage someone, and that you can still address those objections, whatever they might have. But I'm a sucker for a good story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's why we love the movies.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Why do we love the movies?
Oh, and I'm a podcast fiend, and I just absorb so many podcasts, and the ones that I'm always drawn to are things like The Moth or This American Life, or ones where they craft great stories, or even interview shows where people are coming on and telling their story. It just breaks through in a way that data and information just doesn't land.
Yeah, I was just going to say this, and then I'll let you jump in.
No, that's great.
Survivor. I have to look at how many seasons Survivor. 47 seasons of Survivor, and that's all around storytelling. You got individual personalities. You know what they want. There's all these objections. There's all these obstacles. Obstacles away from what they want, and they leave cliffhangers at the end of each episode.
Those open loops. Yeah.
Those open loops, and your brain's like, I need to know. And so I will wait a week. I'll wait a week, and then I'll come back, right?
Yep.
That's storytelling.
That's storytelling.
heavens. I mean,
Well,
come
that's
on.
why we all binge Netflix, because they leave that open loop at the end, and then we're like, "But I've gotta complete the story."
Yeah.
Um,
I,
and I know we're getting into sort of the technique part in a way of, but I just cannot emphasize enough. And here's the thing. I mean, the people that we're talking to are therapists. I mean, what we're doing is holding sacred space for people to tell their stories, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think therapists don't even realize that they are uniquely positioned to be better marketers. They tend to think of themselves as not being cut out for marketing, or, oh, it's
Yeah.
sleazy, or, and I think one of the reasons I love talking about storytelling in general is that you can sort of reframe it as, no, 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 let's just think of it as finding places and ways to tell stories, and to kind of take that listening to stories ability and shift it into, okay, and then how can I tell those stories? I mean, not tell people's personal info, but like,
Right.
how could I craft a good story? uh, I also kind of picture, I think in metaphor because I'm a therapist. And I just picture like cramming a story into every little nook and cranny that you can, like you're packing a suitcase, just like, or a potted plant. Like, how can I cram as many stories into every inch of my marketing as possible? Because it makes such a big difference in terms of helping people understand the value of what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead. I know we got those 3 points we wanted to get to,
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah.
for those
Okay.
who are here live, throw some questions in too as well along the way. We'd love to answer them.
Okay. Yeah. And let me know if questions pop up. I do have the chat up, but I'm not good at dividing my attention. And
I can help you
um,
do that. Yeah.
okay. And feel free to jump in too, because I can be a bit of a rambler. So
Yeah. I'm
I
happy to do it.
wasn't. Um, okay. So, yeah. So, okay. So, first of all, just training your brain to be thinking about, where can I tell more stories? How can I structure more of my marketing in a story format? Um, that's a really important part of this, because our brains light up. I mean, as you said, our brains are more receptive when we hear a story. It engages the emotional part of our brain as well as the information part. Like, if we're just getting a list of information and data, it lights up one part of the brain. If you're hearing a story, it lights up so much more of the brain. We're just so much more present. We are storytelling machines and story hearing machines. Um, and it really becomes a shorthand for the emotional side of whatever it is that we're trying to teach, right? So, again, if you're trying to help people understand the value of therapy, or understand what's possible for them, or understand why their fear, there's objections to therapy. Um, you're trying to help them understand the value of this work. What it ends up doing is just, again, of metaphors. I'm just picturing we turn into a sponge. We become very porous, where we're able to receive that information, right?
Mhm.
And the secret reason that I love to encourage therapists and other helpers to focus on storytelling is that there's a shift in you, right? When you are telling a story about the value of what you do, or if you're telling a story, like a success story with a client, or you're telling your why story, here's how I got into doing this work, right? And why that's important. When you're telling a story, you are, first of all, you're reminding yourself of the value of it. You're starting to go, oh, this is amazing. This is really important. This is really meaningful to me.
Mhm.
And as you're kind of, what's the word, distilling it into words, into a really good, like, you're crafting a good story, you're creating a really clear marketing message. You're starting to tighten up that story, and you're starting to go, oh, like, these are the reframes. These are the, okay, it's not just a bunch of details. There's a deeper story in here of the strengths that I'm bringing to this and the transformation that I help people have. And that makes you feel really good, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Therapists can be really insecure. And I think having a few stories about their work, right? And they hate talking about themselves.
Oh my
Because as you were
gosh.
saying that, I'm like, there's a couple, and you might get into this, but to kind of maybe foreshadow a little bit for our listeners is that therapists have key opportunities to share a few stories in the most important parts
Mhm.
of the therapeutic process.
Mhm.
It's probably somewhere the first one's going to be on your website, having a video or something talking about how you help people and you're uniquely situated to help people.
Mhm.
The second one is in that initial conversation. Maybe it's in the first session, the intake, or maybe it's on the phone, where you might need to have a story or two that positions yourself as that trusted guide because
Mhm.
they're coming to you with that most intimate problem.
Mhm.
And you can say something like, I've helped many people in your position, and this is how I do it.
Mhm.
Right. So there's a story there, or you could share a story of how you've maybe helped a couple people in that particular and what the outcomes might have looked like. And then I think there's another one that's a really important is maybe as you're wrapping up service and you're getting ready to terminate that client, to be able to recap their journey,
Mhm.
story form as a way to kind of close out and bring that ending. To me, that's kind of how I think of like three really kind of important parts. But the two
Mhm.
most important ones are really in the beginning of that
Mhm.
that
Absolutely.
sales marketing stage as they are wondering if they can trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned something like therapists, we often don't like to talk about ourselves, or I mean, I was just talking to a coaching client who was like, I want to talk about how great this is, but I don't want to turn into a narcissist. I was like, I'm really not worried about that for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Most narcissists aren't actually worried. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. So
I
I
say
was
that.
like, a video, um, but what the reframe we kept doing, I was like, and you being able to tell the story of transformation, you being able to tell what's possible, you being able to say, here's why this is awesome. That is a service to the other person,
Mhm.
right? And again, it kind of takes us out of our ego a little bit when we just go, I'm just telling stories. I'm just telling stories. I'm just recounting what's happened.
Mhm.
I'm recounting how I got from there to here. I'm recounting how my client got from here to here.
Yeah.
I'm recounting how I ended up in my specialty. That's all I'm doing. I'm just telling stories. And I remember telling this at the Wise Practice Summit, and there is again the more we retell a story, the more we start to find the little nuggets of gold, and the more we kind of start to find the overstory of it. Of
Mhm.
oh, and here's the theme of that story. This is again, I'm not just recounting details. I'm finding a theme in this. And we see this with our clients, right? We get them to tell their stories. Often it can be helpful to have them retell and retell and retell a story. I know the FOA technique is a trauma treatment. What's the other one called? Pennebaker. Anyway, they have people tell their trauma story over and over and over again, and then they start to find the reframe. The client starts to find the shift from the victim to the survivor reframe. And the story that I love, I heard this years ago. There was a little boy, and his mother said, "Hey, we can go to the toy store, and you can pick out a toy, and it'll be fun." And it was around Halloween, and they had this giant Frankenstein's monster cut out at the entrance to the toy store, and it just terrified him. He just went into a full like trauma response, and screamed, and we got to get out of there. We got to get out
Yeah.
of there. And she heard him just processing the experience over and over again. He said, "Hey, Mom, remember we went to the toy store and we walked in the door and there was a Frankenstein and it terrified me and I screamed and we left." And she's like, "Uh-huh, I remember." And I said, Remember that time we went to the toy store?" Like he kept telling it and telling it. And she just let him tell the story. And then at some point, he was telling the story and he said, "There was a Frankenstein's monster and then I peed on it." Ha 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 ha. And he even made up a detail that wasn't true to this story, but it put him in a more empowered place. And he was no
Mm,
longer scared to go back to the toy store. Something happens when we retell a story. And this is one reason I love to tell my clients to have a signature story. And again, that might be your why, your origin story. If we think about movies, or your origin story, or your here's how I got into this. Usually it's because we were helped by a therapist or by someone else. But it can be something else. It could be a key moment in your journey. So like I have a client who she has a happy marriage, but now she's a divorce counselor because she was working in the school counseling center, and all these children with behavior problems whose parents were getting divorced. She realized, it's not that the child necessarily needs an intervention. It's that the more I talk to the parents, the calmer and more grounded the parents become, and then the children's behavior problems go away. So that's how she found her specialty, is helping children and working with divorced parents to help children. So that's a signature story.
yeah.
I got tired, like that last kid who came in, and I realized I needed to talk to the parents instead of the child. That was the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes to like your personal branding. I'm going to be talking about that at the summit, group practice scale on personal branding. And you kind of need a story to tell, right?
Yeah.
So again, we're talking about how do people remember you? And usually you want to you lead your story with the problem. I had this problem.
Mm-hmm.
I had it.
Mm-hmm.
So I typically start my origin story, and I've said it a lot now, but it starts off with, 8 years ago, my wife came home when she was getting her internship hours where she was working. And she's like, Brent, when I'm fully licensed, I want to start my own private practice.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, I've never started a business. I've never done branding and marketing before. We had 3 kids under 3. Well, one was on the way. We were living in Chicago. And so we had to make this work in order to like live by family. We wanted, so I set the stakes up, but that was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't being fake. Those are all very real things. And then I set it up. And when I started telling it, I actually, I would get to end of my presentation and the main question would be like, well, Brent, what happened? What, started this? I
Uh-huh.
never closed that story loop that I opened. So
Right.
now part of my origin story is I close it and then I move on. And I said, this is now what I'm doing with this.
Yeah.
But I think with every, um, your personal, you start with the problem, kind of like where you were. And that usually that was
Mm-hmm.
because someone helped you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you want to help
Mm-hmm.
others. I was in this difficult, dark place where I was confused and I couldn't get through. Then somebody came along
Yeah.
and now I want to help others in the same way.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that's like a really easy structure to think about your own story. And there's ways you
Yeah.
can nuance it more, but that's kind of what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Well, and you're describing the hero's journey,
Mhm.
right? Which again, Donald Miller and StoryBrand, they do a great job of tapping into the hero's journey. But
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell, this mythologist, amazing human, he identified, hey, we're really telling the same few stories over and over again. There's a general structure, and there's the problem. Like, the hero has a problem. Kind of the flip side of that is the hero longs for something.
Mhm.
It could be a result that they long for. And those can be flip sides of the same coin, right? And they have to leave their comfort zone. They meet a guide. You're the story brand guide. So if I leave out any elements,
No, you're great. You're great. Yeah.
they meet a guide who has a plan. So I'll talk to clients about, you are the Dumbledore to your clients Harry
Mhm.
Potter.
Mhm.
Like you have a process, you have a plan. Um, there are stakes. It could go badly or it could go well. And or I love to talk about Star Wars. You're the
Oh, yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? So use the Force. That's the plan that leads to either success or failure. Failure is the stakes. Success is success, getting the thing they want, but and solving the problem. But also there's that aspirational identity. It's helping them become someone in the process.
Yeah.
And again, there's this parallel thing I think about where we are helping our clients transform into someone new. Like it's who they're becoming, or it's mining for who they truly are, right? But also we're becoming someone in the process.
Yeah,
And the
that's right.
stories we tell shape us.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
there again, there can be something healing about telling your brand story. I was struggling with this. I had a great therapist who helped me see the ways that I was, I didn't have a clear view of myself, or I was overcoming this trauma, or, and then I came out on the other side and I'm able to help other people. Um, the more we tell the story and we nuance it and we focus in on like certain key moments, oh my goodness, there's healing and joy that comes with being able to tell a great brand story too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say this before we maybe move on to the
Yeah.
marketing side, how to
Yeah.
fit stores in your marketing. There's two things. One, and Gene has a question, but that
Yeah.
I'll share in a second. But there's you have to remember you are we see ourselves in our own hero's journey, right? We see ourselves in a story. That's how
Yeah.
we organize our world. And your clients see themselves in a story. So
Hmm.
when you tell your story, you don't want to have it where it's like, I'm still struggling with all these things. Like I haven't even figured it out yet. Right. They're not looking for a therapist who hasn't figured it all out yet. Right.
Yeah.
They're actually looking for someone who's, has a pretty good handle on how to help them. Right.
Right.
So if you ever tell your story, you want to talk about how you had been able to overcome, overcome those. Um, but you don't want to make it about you unless it's going to help show yourself as a trusted guide, because the
Right.
person who's coming to you has a problem and they're looking for a trusted guide and they want to know if they can trust you.
Right.
So your story as it relates to your brand story and your marketing has to be around the ways you help people, not that you're still on
Yeah.
your own journey in the desert trying to find, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
That's with
Yeah.
okay.
Can I jump in on that? And I know we have, I feel like I'm going a little bit all over the place, but
Yeah.
um, and I'm working on, I'll have a freebie available for people soon by the end of the week, about crafting your signature story and building your story bank. And I put some tips for storytelling. And one of the things you want to keep in mind when you're telling a story is you want to have that balance of vulnerability as well as credibility, right? Or empathy and authority.
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
don't want to like yes, you want to tell your story and share some of your vulnerability, but you don't want to bleed all over them and go on about how like all the most gory details, and especially if you're still in it, and I'm still a mess and isn't that great, you can relate to me. No, 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 now it's still about me.
Yeah.
Versus, and through this work and through the work I've continued to do to help people, here's what I understand and what I'm able to keep guiding people through.
Yeah.
That there's credibility, there's authority, as well as, yes, you're a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane, can I put you on the spot? Gene had a question.
Yeah.
I would appreciate hearing a story specifically from start to end. So I'm curious if you might,
Yeah.
that could be your own brand story, or maybe it's a story of one of your clients that you might be able to like, this is the problem they had, and just kind of walk them through kind of start to end of what that transformational look, just to give them example.
Yeah. Okay. Ooh, I am on the spot. And it's so funny. I was thinking about this. I was like, I should be telling this whole thing through a series of stories. um, and I haven't revisited my own signature story in a while. So one of my tips for telling a story is don't ramble. So heads up, if I ramble, I apologize ahead of time. I have a couple of signature stories I like to come back to. Um, I will say okay, and this is about coaching. So I was a successful therapist. I had started my practice. It was thriving. I really wanted to add coaching. And at the time, this was like 10 years ago, everything was, oh, just plug into this formula. You'll have a big online audience. You want to scale. It's all about scaling and starting memberships, and just plug into the formula and you're going to be a millionaire. And I mean, anyway, I was like, well, okay, let me learn this formula. What I'm picturing is working one-on-one with people, but everyone says you need to scale. You got to scale. You got to scale. So I tried the formula. I tried to start this huge membership based scaled program, and it was totally overwhelming. I didn't know what I was doing. It completely fell flat. And I was so sad and
Mm,
so dejected. I don't think I've ever felt that much like a failure. I had a
mm,
lot of dreams attached to it. And this, at first, the belief I took was, I suck at this. I'm not cut out for this. I'm not even cut out for doing any kind of business. And I decided to comfort myself by going to my favorite coffee shop and grabbing a donut and just eating and caffeinating my feelings. And I ran into a friend. She saw my face and just opened her arms and gave me a hug. And I just sobbed. I like snot cried onto her shoulder.
mm,
And I told her what happened. And she reminded me, Jane, do you remember last year when I moved to Colorado for a guy and I sold my house, I closed my business, I said goodbye to all my therapy clients, and the relationship fell apart. She's like,
mm,
it's okay. It's okay to fail. You're going to be okay. And it was a really transformational moment because I was like, you know what? I am going to be okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to take imperfect action. Um, so in my, snotty, puffy-eyed face, I literally had a colleague reach out to me and say, hey, can we hop on the phone for an hour for some coaching? Um, and I got in the car and I lied and told him I had a cold and I coached him and it was great. We had this great one-on-one session as I was like, grabbing like food bags to wipe my face, we're over the phone. And I also, so from doing this, I had all this debt because I'd bought the website and all the marketing channels and all the, domains and all that stuff. And I didn't have a way to pay back my members who had joined. And I had a great coach, and she said, Jane, why don't you offer them one-on-one coaching instead of a refund? And so I did. And it turned out I loved one-on-one coaching. I was
mm.
great at one-on-one coaching. And that was the beginning of my current business, where I do business coaching one-on-one with people. So the lessons from that: failure is okay. In fact, I always say you have to make first pancakes, right? You've got to make that mushy or burnt pancake to get that perfect second or third pancake. The other thing is just self-compassion. You've got to have self-compassion in this process, right? Um, And the third, and this is one that I've really drawn more in telling the story. It actually has evolved to, and actually the main thing is, don't try to build a business that isn't the one you want to have.
Mm.
When you do here's the should business, the one I should have, you shoot yourself in the foot. I should have done I knew the business I wanted in the first place, but I should it on myself. And that process, my business was looking out for me. And through this horrible experience, it guided me to, this is what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Yeah, I
There's a
love that.
signature story.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those listening, Jane started with what she wanted and what she thought she wanted, right?
Or
What she
what others told me I
should have,
wanted.
yeah, you should have, I should want this. I should
Yeah.
want this, right? And then others told you. And then you had the setup and you had the failure, right? And the fallout from that. I love some of your descriptions, snotty, snot crying. I made pancakes this morning too for my kids, so that was
Okay.
like very visual.
Fresh
And then
metaphor.
like the friend came along, spoke a kind
Hmm.
word. I failed in some ways. Maybe I failed even harder than you, and you're gonna be,
Hmm.
you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And then you saw that transformational journey, like what it looks like afterwards, and it was
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a beautiful like story. And I
Thank
was even
you.
drawn into it in those moments. I'm like, oh, this is so good. Forgetting the fact that this was actually an object lesson
Oh,
in that moment.
good.
You know what I mean? But
I'm
that's
so
the
glad.
power of story. And I'm sure some of everyone else, others would listening and watching felt
Yeah.
the same way. So
I'm so
thank you for
glad.
that.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure.
all right. Well, let's
Um,
talk about, we have a couple, what point do you want to jump into? How to fit more stories in your marketing, or where to find stories you tell, or in some inspiration, or put some
Yeah.
together, or
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about where to use stories. I do email marketing. I always start with a story. And it's interesting. As soon as I started jumping off all of my emails with a story before doing whatever the lesson of the newsletter was. Within a few weeks, I started having people say, Jane, your emails are the only ones I read. I love your emails. I love them. I love them. I love getting that feedback. And the main change I made was I'm always putting in a story. So again, it speaks to the brain. Um,
Well, can I ask
yeah,
that? Because there's two ways you can use story. One, you can
yeah,
use the framework of a story, or you
right.
can actually use a story
Properly.
like an anecdote, like something like you just did, like a
Yeah.
story of someone, like a real life story. What are you typically, or
I
maybe
typically do like an anecdotal story.
okay,
So I'll hear a fun or interesting story and I'll be like, that's a great story. I don't even know what the lesson or metaphor from that is going to be. I'm putting that in a story and then I'm going to connect it to what I do. So the structure is great story, segue, and why is that important? Or what does that have to do with a therapy practice?
yeah,
A little segue and then jumping into, so here are the lessons I want you to draw from this. And then the call to action of, hey, hit reply and tell me what you got from that, or hit reply and tell me how you applied it to your business, that kind of thing.
yeah, great,
Yeah, yeah. But other people, yeah, they'll do the sort of the larger framework of what's the client's problem, what, or the thing that they want,
hmm
or focus on any of those elements, right? What are the stakes of not getting therapy, or what does it mean to be a guide to the hero, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, okay. So stories, gosh, they can go in blogs. They can go in like, I didn't do this today, but it's great to start any sort of presentation or workshop that you do with a story that immediately draws people in. Um, and when we were at Wise Practice, I realized, oh, I'm talking about story and I don't have a story. And I was like, well, I just left hurricane ravaged Asheville. I was still very shaky. And
mhm,
I think I teared up when I did this, but I opened a story loop and I started with the wind started blowing. And then I just started talking and I was like, all right, I told a little story about making, how do I make coffee before the electricity goes off? But I invited others to close the story loop. Um, it's great to start a workshop or any presentation you do with a story. And even if you're networking and someone's like, so what do you do?
yeah,
Well, I'm a therapist. Oh, cool. Um, if you can frame it, you can tell a story about, well, so for instance, I had a client come in the other day with this type of thing and we did this and now they're able to go into these places that they used to be afraid of. It can be a hero's journey, like before, during, and after,
yeah. That's
right?
that's like you could talk about because people have done that and I've tested this out like at
Oh
block
yeah.
parties. They're like, "What do you do?" And I go into my origin story and I make it really short because there's kids
Hmm.
running around and it's chaotic. But like you could do that like a really short. A client came in the other day. I'm a therapist, and a client came in the other day.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
problem, and well, and you can just whatever be really general, and then you could end it like, and that's why I love doing therapy.
Yes.
I get to help people. So that's what I do.
Yeah.
And like they will never ever forget
Yeah.
what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. You
And that,
can
that
do
comes,
it. Yeah, exactly. You can do, and metaphors are another, they're not a story per se, but they're visual.
mhm.
So you can also say something like, it's random, but like, I'm a soul plumber. A what? I help people plumb the depths and get unclogged from their problems. Like, but you can incite curiosity or create something that it's a visual story
Mhm.
through a metaphor. Um, or even just the difference between saying, I'm a therapist, I do internal family systems versus I take clients who are feeling this way and I use this process called IFS to help them feel this way, more aligned, more alive. There's a before, during, and after, even in that little phrase.
Yeah.
Okay.
And or you could
Yeah.
do let's say you specialize like in working with kids and divorce or something.
Uh-huh.
You could be like, you know how there's a lot of parents who get divorced and they're really concerned about how their kids are going to turn out because
Yeah.
there's a lot of fighting and but deep down they're like they don't want to mess them up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a child therapist and I specialize in helping.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like
That's so
they will
great.
never ever forget.
They'll never
We're like,
forget. And they can picture it. They're picturing it in their mind
yeah.
as you are describing that. And that's, again, you're helping them create a story in their minds. So I love that. And actually, okay, so speaking of, oh, wait, let me talk. Sorry, there's so much I
Well,
want to
I
talk
was
about.
going to say, well, but marketing is really helping other people memorize what you do
Yes,
and remember
exactly.
what you do, right? So go ahead. That's kind of
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. If they're visualizing it, then it's like, that's like, okay, let me use another metaphor. It's like Velcro, like there are all these little hooks, like that visual and every story you tell, it's like a little hook in the Velcro where it's sticky. It sticks to
right.
their brain.
Right. And
Um,
people, and that's the way the brain's designed, right? Like it's
yeah,
going to remember that because they're going to be like, maybe I'm going to need that information later. Or, oh, I know a friend who's really struggling with this and they could actually use that kind of help,
yeah,
right? The brain's
exactly.
constantly thinking about how do I like not get into trouble or how do I get out of trouble?
Yes,
How do I avoid trouble and pain?
yes, exactly. So one thing I'm gonna skip forward and then skip backwards in my order of how I was gonna talk about this. So,
Okay. Okay.
because I'm so visual, y'all can see me doing a lot of this. Um, so you remarked on when I was telling my origin story, the snotty nose and the puffy eyes, right? And even like I'm picturing myself like reaching for the donut, like you
Yeah.
know. um, when you're practicing telling your stories, throw in little concrete details and
Mm,
specifics.
yes.
That also makes it sticky. It adds little Velcro hooks to their brain. It becomes so much more visual.
Yeah. That's a good, I used to do that. Uh, I had this
Yeah.
one thing on my origin story where I was like, I was in my front yard, the leaves were falling off the tree, and I was just raking leaves, these big piles of brown and yellow leaves. And
Yeah.
my twin little girls were just jumping in and enjoying it and loving it. And I was thinking about how in the world are we going to start this practice so we can provide for our kids?
Mm,
But those are, but
yeah.
that idea of like the
See it.
leaves falling and I mean, that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
at. But just
Yep.
those little details and people are like, I'm with you. I'm with you. I see it.
Exactly.
You're
Put
doing it.
in sensory details. It's
Mhm.
one thing to say, oh, I became a therapist because, I struggled with depression as a teenager and my therapist really helped me and now I get to help others. It's another thing to say, I wore nothing but sweatpants and would, cry until there was no tears that would come out of my eyes left anymore, or, just again, just put in, I ate nothing but Doritos for a week, whatever.
Right.
Like just, I know these are all off the top of my
It's
head, but
that
like,
scene from Uncle Buck where he's laying back, he's been eating Doritos, and he just gets
yeah,
the vacuum sucker and just starts cleaning them off his chest. John
right,
Candy, that
exactly.
character. Like that's kind of like where I
And
was.
like, and even as you say that, and this is such a segue to what I was gonna say, that is a great little story. Like something like that. I want to glom onto that image you just presented, Brent, and put it in one of my emails and say, have you ever seen Uncle Buck? And he's doing this and da, 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 and then put a segue to let's relate that to building a business, right? So what I want y'all to be doing, because you asked like, where do you find stories? You have your story, and we're often kind of the after of our clients before. Wait, did I say that? We're the after of our clients before. Like often our ideal client is some version of us a few years ago,
Right.
right? Or decades ago. So your story, you have your success stories, or the stories that you learned from because they were not great as as you were building your practice. But I am always scanning for stories. I listen to story podcasts, and like yesterday, I heard Tom Hanks tell this great story about when he was a kid, and they used to make up plays because they were latchkey kids, And I was like ran over. I have paper all over my kitchen because in my house, like I have little notepads because I was like, I've got to write this down before I forget it, or
Yes.
I'll do a voice note to myself. Um, if I hear someone just tell a great story, I will adopt that story because I can tell their story, but then connect it to what I do because it becomes a metaphor. Or if I watch a great movie, I quote. Oh my gosh, one of my trademarks in my emails is I'm always quoting 80s and 90s pop culture, but like I love to quote 80s movies and 90s movies because I'm a
Yeah,
dork.
those are really good.
I'm a history nerd too, so I'll tell like random fun history facts. But again, it's telling a story. So anything, if someone tells you a funny story, if you like just have somewhere to collect them before you forget them. I have
Mhm.
just an ongoing document on my computer where I'm like, ooh, how could I like what's something I want to teach and how could I connect that to that? Because that's a hilarious story or that's a memorable
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Stories are everywhere and you start training your brain for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
can I, as we're kinda starting to wrap up a little bit,
Yeah.
I think I want listeners to remember, like, good practice owners, like, those who are thinking about marketing and their branding, they're just good storytellers. So I think that's just it's like a
Yeah.
I mean, you're in it all the time. You're listening to people's stories all the time. So
Yeah.
so use that because
Yeah.
it's a superpower that
It
will help you
is.
stand out from the competition, I promise you.
It is.
I have
And
a go ahead, because I
I
have a
was just
question.
gonna say, and again, it makes marketing not feel sleazy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because if we're like, I gotta market myself, ugh, I gotta get out there and tell some inspiring stories.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I can do that.
This question I have here is about incorporating humor, and I think you said a way to do this in your workshop, but I'll let I'm gonna try
Yeah.
to remember how you but you talked about how to do humor, but it had to do something with, like, images or concrete like,
Oh,
metaphors.
yeah. Well, again, sometimes things like sometimes adding that specificity, like a concrete detail or a brand name. Notice I mentioned Dorito. Like there's a difference between I was sad and I was crying into my Doritos like Uncle Buck. You know what I mean? Like
Right, yeah,
so adding little details and brand names and even looking for funny words. Like, I was really mad at him. In my head I was calling him Mr. Poopy Pants. Like you can find
yeah,
and it's a practice. It's a skill. Listen to funny storytellers. I love the Conan O'Brien podcast. And I love Smartless because all those guys are doing is just being hilarious and riffing off of each other, and it makes me funnier. I actually say I'm not a funny person. I'm good at curating humor.
yeah. I mean, you couldn't just watch I mean, there's so many comedian specials out there,
Oh
like,
my
that's what they
gosh.
do, is just storytelling with humor,
Yeah.
right? How do they phrase certain things? Like,
Yeah.
the other, I was thinking, like, going back to the concrete example, and, like, if you're not a very funny person, but they're gonna laugh because they can relate, right? So, like, the idea would be
Yes.
I was just feeling so bad for myself. I just
Yeah.
went down Main Street hoping that the Krispy Kreme hot donut sign was on or something
Right.
like that, or, like
Yeah. Well, it's vulnerability. It's things are
right,
funny because they're real, right? And because
right.
they're relatable. And so I think the more relatable you're being, and not being boundaryless, not bleeding all over them, but sharing enough that they're like, "Oh, I can relate to that."
Yeah,
Then
yeah,
it kind of naturally becomes funnier because people go, "Oh, I know. I totally know that feeling."
right, right.
But listening to stories is a great way to get better at crafting stories. So listen, I mean, again, I mentioned The Moth. It's a podcast where people tell their stories live,
Yeah,
but they do a lot of work around crafting those stories. Um, I just love to listen to good storytellers, and it's made me a better storyteller.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's made me funnier.
Gene said, "Where do I find more information, examples of stories in addition to podcasts?" Yeah, I just go Netflix or whatever. Just look up comedians.
Oh my gosh, I
Just watch
know.
comedian specials and see how they do it, because
Yeah.
that is a craft on their own. I had a bunch
And
of
and
people Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say reading. I mean, I became a better therapist and a better marketer when I started reading a lot more fiction.
Mm,
We read a lot of, psychology books and marketing books, but go read as much fiction as you can. You will become a better storyteller.
yeah.
And you'll find like great language, juicy language, as
Mhm.
well as little anecdotes, little ways to tell. Yeah, I read fiction as a practice for marketing and being a better therapist.
Jean said, "What is the name?" She said. What was the name? Did you mention a name?
Oh, and the name in relation to what?
I don't know. Give
I
us a little
don't
more.
know. Ooh, Oh, I'm seeing your
Moth Story Hour, maybe? Was that
moth.
what? Not a fan of humorous ones.
Oh,
Yeah.
.com. Yeah,
Or
is that what the name that
I
we're
don't know.
looking
She's gonna
for?
have to give us a little
Or
more.
Conan O'Brien or
Mhm. I
Smartless?
just put this one
Anyway,
up as a question. Yeah,
yeah,
you
no,
give us
that's
a little
great.
more, Gina, with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Here's another question that someone submitted. Appropriately weaving in story and eye towards ethics and
Yeah.
confidentiality. So this came up a couple different times in the
Yeah, no,
submission.
that's great. That's really important, obviously, that we don't want to give identifying details.
That's assumed in a lot of
Yeah, and sometimes it's kind of you can create what's the word I'm looking for? A condensed version of multiple clients, where if it's something that you see a lot. Um, so yeah, just you use your judgment and maybe run it by someone, but you don't want to say, so the client that, and yeah, you don't want to say, well, I'm not going to say who they were, but they were 6 feet tall and blonde and they worked in the, such and such administration and they had this job, right? Like, no, you can mask details. You can make it so that someone wouldn't go, wait, you're talking about me. But then again, sometimes even when you do that, you'll just have 10 people going, you're talking about me. And it's like, no, 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 you're my ideal client.
Right.
So do the best you can. And again, appropriate self-disclosure.
Right.
Have boundaries, but don't, you don't have to be a robot. So
This one is stories to attract your ideal client. And I'll
yeah.
address this and I'll pass it
Yeah.
over to you. I still
Great.
think you need to have your website tells a story that attracts your ideal client. I think your profile page could have a story that addresses your ideal client.
Yeah.
I think those are the primary things. And then as you're in those sales conversations, if training your intake coordinators to maybe tell stories better,
Yeah.
or if you're the one doing that, have a couple pocket stories that you might be able to use that you've
Yeah.
developed that work well and helping to be able to clearly communicate how you help solve their problems.
Yeah. I tell people to have a story bank. And
Mm,
actually the freebie I was mentioning, which will be up soon, I promise, probably tomorrow. It's called the Story Bank Starter. Um, here are some questions to answer here are some stories to tell they're going to help you have a solid story bank to draw from.
yeah.
So let's see. Oh, so to attract your ideal client, I mean, I think when you're telling stories that resonate with the problems that they have, the things that they want, the fears that they're experiencing, um, the things that that you're good at guiding them through, like when you're telling stories about those things with an eye towards the person you love to work with, then that's what attracts them, right? Like it's in the telling of the story that you start to distill your core marketing message. When I look back at my crying into the snotting, crying, hugging my friend moment, I can distill, oh, wait, here are my core marketing messages. Imperfect action is everything. There's no shame and failure. You're becoming someone along the way. That my business was leading me towards something. And don't do the business that you should have, do the business that you really desire to have. Like, that's what speaks to my ideal clients. And it's good that I had to just retell that story because, again, the more I tell it, the more I can tighten it up and make those points.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was having a thought and I was typing something in the thing to show, but Aaron
Mm.
Sorkin,
Mm-hmm.
somebody referenced him. He's written a ton of shows, including The
Oh,
West
yeah.
Wing. By
Mm-hmm.
far, The West Wing might be one of the best written
Oh, my
shows in
gosh.
the history
So
of written.
good. The Walker
The
Talks.
Newsroom, he also wrote on that. At the end of the day, if you ask if any of these characters died off, would you be set? Like, it would be hard to. Like, you just end up loving all these characters. They're so well thought.
Yeah.
But his basically is sort of like, what is it that they want, and then
Mm-hmm.
what's the obstacle?
Yeah.
So notice even Aaron Sorkin and all these movie writers, screenwriters, they have a formula.
Oh,
They have a
yeah.
formula. 100% they have a formula. But it's how they play. That's how they play it. How did they develop that problem? What are those
Yeah.
obstacles? How are they using language to really grab people
Mhm.
uh, and draw them into the story? So
Mhm.
I think as we're kind of wrapping up here, it's like it's okay to use a formula, and there's
Oh,
nothing wrong.
yeah.
It's a craft. So you're not going to
Yeah.
you're not going to be the best storyteller right away. But what you're going to do is you're going to have a simple formula. What is that? What is it that they want? And then what are
Mhm.
those obstacles that are getting in the way for what that
Mhm.
hero wants to get to? And the
Mhm.
more you kind of learn that rhythm and you play with
Mhm.
words, you have your word bank, your story bank, what Jane's talking about, the better
Mhm.
storyteller you'll be. And um, I mean, let's just if you think about the
The
last election story, usually people say the ones with the best stories win at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
that
right?
was oh my gosh, it was John Quincy Adams who said, "Whoever tells the best story wins." But there was a marketing guru, and I can't remember who it was, who said, "Whoever tells the most stories wins."
Oh,
But having a structure actually helps you draw meaning. And isn't that what we're doing for our clients? They're telling us, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and we're reflecting back the bigger picture of the meaning. And we're reflecting
yeah,
back their identity in a way. We're helping them move into that aspirational identity because we're going, oh, you're a survivor. Or, oh, here's your strength.
yeah. But the only way you can get them to that point
Yeah.
is using a story structure because story is so clear,
Yeah.
right? You want them
Yeah.
to be able to see so clearly that journey that they're
Yeah.
on or the journey that you've been in
Mm-hmm.
so that the transformational payoff, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about like the payoff of that I mean, if you think about, oh man, we could do it. Like,
Yeah, we could
I
go
mean,
on
like
and on.
the payoffs are so sweet
Yeah.
when the story is clearly told. I mean, the Count of Monte Cristo, like the
Mm-hmm.
payoff of that, of the sweet revenge that he gets, or
Mm-hmm.
like I actually love Kill Bill, like Von.
Mm-hmm.
The payoff is so great because they spent 2 movies
Yeah.
getting she's Uma Thurman's just working through all these obstacles to getting finally to Bill to finally kill him,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the payoff of Top Gun, right? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just yeah, there's just so much of that on storytelling. So the more you're able to clearly follow the structure so you can be
Mm-hmm.
clear, the payoff's going to be better for anyone who's listening to your marketing materials.
Mm-hmm. And I'll end on what you said. I mean, what we've said a few times. Just start telling them. Just
Yeah,
start telling
just
them.
start. Yeah,
Tell little tiny stories, tell big epic stories. Just practice, practice, practice. Notice the uh yeah. And even like as oh, this is such a meta moment. Uh-oh, we're gone.
oh good, we're
Um
good, we're
oh, we're
good.
good. Even I take this from Priya Parker, who's a gathering expert. She says, "What's the story of what just happened here? What's the story of what we did here in this gathering?" And it's a question that you could ask at the end of a session, but I'm thinking, oh, we just had an interaction that hopefully helps people draw the meaning out from what they're doing in a way that helps others see the value of it
Yeah,
through stories.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's end there. Let me show this screen here so people can get, you know, how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah.
JaneCarterCoaching.com.
Yes.
Is that the best? I'm trying to
That's the
think.
best that's the best way to reach me. And I have a free resources page. And okay, so today is Monday. Tuesday, the 25th, I will have my new Story Bank freebie up. I didn't realize this was going to be a live thing, so I
There
thought
you
I had a little
go. There's
lag
the
time.
website. Yep.
Um, but I also have some other freebies up, so feel free to get those. You'll get on my email list, and you'll get to hear all my little weekly nerdy, funny stories that teach you insights for your business. So yeah, this is so fun to be here. Thank you
Awesome.
so much, and thanks for
Yeah.
everyone for your questions and your
Yeah.
feedback. Yeah.
All very good questions. Again, you'll get an email at the replay. And thank you, James, so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us or joining me for the Brand Your Practice podcast. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one. All right. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.